If you've ever gotten hung up on the piano buzzword technique, I have some great news for you today. The word technique gets tossed around a lot in piano circles, and it's something that a lot of people tend to worry about and that I've heard a lot of students concerned about. But I am of the opinion that this is often approached from the wrong angle. First and foremost, let's just clarify the term. What is technique? What is piano technique? To me, piano technique is being able to sit down and produce the sounds at the piano that you want to be able to create in order to make the style of music that you want. This is a process that is always evolving. You're not going to be able to practice Hanon for 6 months and then say, okay, I've mastered piano technique. I know everything I need to know. I have been playing piano for 25 years and I am also still developing my technique. I'm also always trying to get different sounds out of the piano and create different atmospheres. And that always requires approaching the instrument from a different perspective, from acquiring new tools. And the fact that 25 years into playing the piano, I'm still actively developing my technique should actually be really encouraging to you because it takes the pressure off. You do not need to sit down and force yourself through some book or some exercises that will miraculously open your eyes. It's a work in progress and it's something that you're going to develop through every single piece that you ever learn. So if you've been wildly searching the internet for the silver bullet that's going to fix your piano technique, I have good news for you. There's no silver bullet. You can stop searching. There's no one way of perfecting piano technique. It's a lifetime journey. You're going to be doing this every single time that you sit down to the piano. The other good bit of news is you don't have to do countless exercises in order to get there. You can use the pieces you're learning in order to develop your technique and guide you along the way. Now, all of that said, I'm not saying you should never do technical exercises, by no means, but I want you to change how you're approaching these exercises. And I don't want you to think that technique is a barrier to entry for playing the pieces that you want to play and learning the things that you want to learn. If you have technical skills that aren't developed in a way that are going to serve you in a piece that you're learning, you can learn those as you learn the piece and you can learn them through learning that piece. Waiting to perfect your technique before you start playing the pieces that you really want to play is a bit like waiting to learn a language before you've mastered every single vowel and consonant combination that you have in a language. And that is something that people do. There are people who get really hung up on morphology and pronunciation, and then they never learn the language because they're so concentrated on trying to figure out how to say that they never start forming sentences. They never start communicating with people because they're so caught up on what their mouth needs to be doing and micromanaging things that in the long run aren't the end-all be-all, that it prevents them from ever getting started. And that's what I don't want anyone to ever suffer through at the piano. I'm going to take this language metaphor one step further and then we'll bring it back to playing the piano. Does pronunciation matter in language learning? Yes, you want to make sure that you're understood. You want to make sure that the people that you're communicating with actually understand what you're trying to say. Does your pronunciation have to be perfect in order for that to happen? Absolutely not. It's something that the more you learn about the language, the more you use the language, the more you can develop it and improve and refine over time. And with playing the piano, it works exactly the same way. Is developing technique important? Yes. Of course, there are certain approaches to playing that are really essential in order to feel more at home at the instrument and in order to really be able to comfortably play the pieces that you want to be able to play. But you don't have to have it all down in order to get started. So what are the key elements to getting started? What are the things that you need to master, that you need to be comfortable with in order to start playing the piano and feeling more at home at the piano? I would boil it down to the following steps. It's basic, but first things first, you need to learn how to sit properly. I sit a bit low. You might not want to sit this low. For most students, I probably wouldn't recommend that they sit this low. This is just how I feel comfortable at the piano after my decades of playing. And it's what I found works well for me. There's no one correct height for sitting at the piano. There is too low, there is too high. Somewhere in that happy middle is a good place to be. Then the other thing with sitting at the piano, notice I'm not at the back of the bench. If I were, I'd be way too far away to even play. And that is a mistake that a lot of people make. They scoot the bench way up under so that they can sit all the way at the back of the bench while they're playing. That's also not ideal. We need to be on the front third or so of the bench so that our center of gravity is leaning slightly forward and the weight from our upper body is going into the keys because it doesn't all depend on our fingers. From there, of course, it helps to have good posture, sit tall, straight back, shoulders back, and feel really confident sitting in front of the piano as well. The other basics that you need to make sure you have in order are, we don't want our wrists down or resting on the keys. A lot of little kids like to do this. They rest their hand on the keys and then they try to play with their fingers. Extremely uncomfortable. It's hard to go very fast. It's hard to feel at home with the piano like that. The wrist should be in a fairly neutral position, nice and relaxed. You should have a bit of flexibility in your wrist when you play, as you're playing and before you start playing. And then the other rules of thumb are shoulders relaxed, elbows relaxed, and then fingers should be more or less in what I would say a convex position. I don't like to use the term curved fingers just because I have found that leads to a lot of claw-like playing. We try to really force our fingers into a curved position, which can be counterproductive. I have a tutorial on that if you want to check that out. And there is a trick that helps you develop this really nice rounded position without collapsing knuckles and so on. With those basics in place, and I really do think that's enough to get started and to start to develop your ideas at the piano and to start knowing where to start with your technique, then you just need to get some mileage in at the piano. Just like learning a language, you're not going to be able to perfect your pronunciation if you can only speak 5 sentences of German, and you're not going to be able to perfect your technique at the piano if you've only ever played 5 pieces or 5 scales or 5 whatever. We have to get mileage in at the instrument, so start playing. That's the good news. And the crux of the issue is listen to your body as you play, because your body will start to send you signals. Some things are uncomfortable. The piano isn't a very ergonomic instrument, but by and large, if something feels off, that's a signal that there's something that you should be paying attention to in your playing, that you're holding too much tension somewhere, or that you don't have enough tension. That can also be an issue, then we're falling off the keys. But playing and listening to your body is really the best way to start developing your technique. I always like to give you some specific exercises so that you know exactly what you can go do in your practice sessions, so you can immediately start applying these principles. So my prescription for you, your piano prescription for technique for the next few weeks, I want you to be playing at least 1 major scale per day. You can add 1 minor scale in addition to that if you want. I want you practicing a chord progression and maybe an arpeggio if you feel comfortable with it. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, work up to it. I want you aiming towards these arpeggios as well. And then I want you to find the trickiest spots in at least one of your pieces and turn that into an exercise. We're going to go more in detail on that next week. I'm going to give you some examples on how to do that. So if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, ring the bell. You'll receive a notification when that tutorial is online. And I'm going to walk you through those basic technical exercises that you're going to start doing in the meantime, and that's really enough to get you going. So how should you sit down and do these exercises? I want you to do it at the beginning of your practice session, just because if you put it off to the end, it's very easy to forget or just say, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or oops, I ran out of time. I want you to start with this. It'll take you 2-3 minutes max, and that will really help you start actively developing your technique. So before I show you this, I want you to keep in mind, this is not about the what, this is all about the how. So the what is, yes, practice the major scale. Yes, if you're new to scales, I would recommend right hand 1 octave, left hand 1 octave, hands together, slowly 1 octave. But technique, remember, what was our definition of technique? Technique is not being able to play fast. Technique is not being able to play smoothly. Technique is not being able to play X, Y, Z. Technique is being able to produce the sounds you want at the piano when you want it. You have it on demand. And so your key here is not just to practice the scale. When you're first learning the notes, you're probably going to feel happy that you managed the notes. That's fine. But once you get past that basic stage, again, this is not about fast. This is not about speed. Yet, anyway. I want you to give yourself an assignment for that scale and make sure it happens. So maybe you're going to play the right hand staccato. And you're listening really specifically or if you're creating the kind of staccato that you want. Maybe you want really short staccato. Or maybe you want a longer staccato, something that's a bit more stretched out, what we would sometimes call portato. Again, it's not about the what, it's about the how, and listening to see if you accomplish what you set out to do, and observing your body. What do you need to do to make those sounds? What works well? What isn't working well? And that whole observation process, it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but you have to give yourself an assignment. And then maybe when you play hands together, you want to play legato, but pianissimo, nice and quiet. And what's the quietest you can get and still have the sounds come out? Again, it's about the how, not about the what. Give yourself an assignment, listen to see if you accomplish what you set out to do, and observe your body and what needs to happen in order to produce those sounds that you're looking for. Then I said I would recommend doing a chord progression. You can do the standard 1, 4, 5, 1. There are several different ways that you can approach that. There's not one that's better or one that's worse. There are pros and cons of each. But make sure, listen, that all of the notes are sounding at the same time. That you're really finding your position before you play, and that every finger is resting on a key and is well supported, so that you start to feel more at home at the piano. If you struggle with that, you can play them note by note for starters, and then all together. If this feels uncomfortable, refer to the video that I mentioned earlier. It's listed down in the description below. Be sure to check it out so that you can have a few more tools in your toolkit to help support you in this process. And then beyond that, I said to do the arpeggio. And as you play your arpeggio, I want you to really pay attention. I want you to go slow and actually play it staccato for at least the first 2 weeks. Because the biggest mistake students make with arpeggios is they find the notes, the hand is sort of in a claw position and ready to go. You play every single note, and you'll never develop the speed that you want if you're playing your arpeggios like that. Play the right fingering, play the correct fingering. So for E major, like I'm showing you now, it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 2, 1. And notice, when I'm playing the 5th finger on the top note, my thumb came along for the ride. It's not hanging out on this lower E. It's resting gently beside the rest of my hand. And then you'll start to speed that up, and then you'll be able to go faster. But just take these building blocks, and again, it's all about listening to your body and making sure that every finger is properly supported. Not just that you're playing the right fingers on the right keys, but that you don't have to keep the hand in a claw position in order to make that happen. The wrist doesn't have to stay locked, and you don't have, because it develops tension through all of this apparatus. It's all connected. And if you make sure that every finger is supported, you can just land on any of the notes and feel really secure in that fingertip, knowing that it's supported from all of this. But if we're playing like this, it's no longer supported in the same way. It's not supported in a way that's going to help you build speed and efficiency in that playing in the long run. Just for example's sake, so you have the left hand also. The left hand has sort of the inverse of that fingering. So it's 5, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 5. There are a lot of books that have all of the scales and arpeggios with all of the fingerings, and if that's a resource that feels useful to you, go for it. Hannon has all of them listed out. There are a bunch of different ways that you can find those things. I also have a resource that has, I don't really love using sheet music with scales just because I think it can be really overwhelming, the reading process accompanied with that. I like to just write out the letters and write out the fingerings, and then you have it and you're good to go. Whichever resource feels the most valuable to you, whichever one feels the most helpful to you, latch onto that and go with it. So for this week, that's your whole assignment. Play your scale, play your chords, play your arpeggios, and really just be an observer, be a detective. Notice what you see, notice what you feel, notice what's working well, notice what's not working well, and give yourself an assignment every step of the way. I want to play staccato. I want to play fortissimo. I want to play pianissimo. I want to crescendo. I want to get louder going up and get quieter going down. And if you want bonus points, make yourself do something different in every single session so that you're always continually developing those musical skills. Because again, technique is about creating the sounds that we want on demand at the piano so that we can create the music that we love, that we want, in an expressive way that really says what we want it to say. That's the value of piano technique, not being able to play super fast and lots of Hannon and lots of Czerny and lots of whatever. It all comes back to making the music you love. And as long as you're approaching it with this intentionality, you're going to develop all of the skills that you need, and you're really going to start to feel at home at the piano. As always, if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions for other tutorials that you would like to learn more about, let me know in the comments below. I always look forward to reading what you have to say. And until next time, happy practicing.